Imagine this. You're walking down a quiet street at 2 a.m. The air is still, the world asleep, but your mind is racing. You just left a party where everyone laughed, drank, posted their smiles online, but the moment you step away from the noise, it hits again, that hollow ache inside your chest. It's not pain exactly, it's not sadness either. It's a kind of emptiness that doesn't even have a name. So you light another cigarette, scroll through your phone, open another app, swipe, click, consume. You reach for something, anything, to not feel what you're feeling. You tell yourself it's nothing, everyone does it, but deep down, you know something's wrong. Now picture this on a larger scale. Entire cities built on distraction. Entire lives revolving around the pursuit of something more. More success, more followers, more dopamine. But no matter how much we get, it's never enough. Why? Here's the paradox that should stop you in your track. Addiction isn't about pleasure, it's about pain. And more often than not, it's the pain you never knew you were carrying. Ask yourself, what do you reach for when no one is watching? What habits shape your day that you pretend aren't there? Why do some people escape addiction while others fall into it again and again? Is it genetics, weak willpower, chemical hook? That's what you've been told. That addiction is a problem of the substance or the behavior, that some people are just wired wrong. But what if that's a lie? What if addiction isn't the disease but the symptom? What if it's not about what you're doing, but what you're running from? Dr. Gabor Maté, a physician who spent years working with the most severe cases of addiction in Vancouver's downtown east side, people hooked on heroin, meth, and worse, came to a disturbing conclusion. Every single person he met was trying to soothe the wound. Not one of them became addicted because they enjoyed the drug. They became addicted because the pain was unbearable without it. Let that sink in. What if the homeless man injecting in an alley isn't different from the corporate executive who can't stop checking his email at midnight? What if the teenage girl obsessing over her body image is chasing the same escape as the alcoholic father she despises? What if addiction isn't about the substance, but about the soul crying out through any means it can? Maté asks a question that echoes like a warning bell in a sleeping world. Not why the addiction, but why the pain? Sit with that. It's a question that doesn't just apply to heroin or alcohol. It applies to social media, porn, shopping, perfectionism, overworking, binge eating, gambling, even spirituality when used as a way to bypass reality. Addiction isn't limited to the desperate. It thrives in the polished, the successful, the silently suffering. And here's the terrifying truth. The very society we live in not only ignores the roots of this pain, it actively deepens them. Through disconnection, shame, and the illusion of individualism, we've created a culture that breeds emptiness. Then we punish people for trying to fill it. So the question becomes, what is this pain we're all trying to escape? Where does it come from? And why do we fear facing it so much that we'd rather numb ourselves to death than feel it? You think you're in control, you think you have no addictions, but take away your distractions for 1 week, your phone, your sugar, your validation, and see what rises to the surface. See what screams when silence enters the room. This is not just about drugs, this is about the human condition. And now you're left standing at the edge of a realization too big to ignore. Because if addiction is not the enemy, but the messenger, then what it's trying to tell us might just shatter everything we think we know about ourselves. Now we ask, where does this pain come from? And why does no one want to talk about it? Addiction is not the fire, it's the smoke. And yet, for decades, we've built an entire system, medical, legal, cultural, around extinguishing the smoke, never asking what's burning underneath. To answer why the pain, we have to go further back, not to the first drink or the first hit, but to the first wound. The moment, often forgotten or dismissed, when your nervous system learned that this world was not safe, that your emotions were not welcome, that who you were, raw, vulnerable, unfiltered, was too much or not enough. Gabor Maté, informed by both science and deep compassion, traces addiction not to personal failure, but to personal wounding. He argues that trauma is the common denominator, not always in the form of dramatic abuse or catastrophe, but in the subtle, chronic neglect of emotional need, the kind that slips through unnoticed, the kind that wears a smile. Imagine being a child who cries out and is met with silence, who is punished for anger, ignored in sadness, or told, "You're too sensitive." Over time, the child doesn't just repress emotion, they begin to disconnect from their very self. They learn that to be loved, they must not be real. They must be manageable, appealing, quiet. This creates a fracture. A false self begins to form, a mask designed to win approval and avoid rejection. Carl Jung would call this the persona, the face we show to the world. But behind the mask, the pain festers, the shadow grows. Jung warned, Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Addiction is one of the loudest ways the shadow speaks. It's a desperate attempt to regulate emotions that were never allowed to be expressed, to feel something, anything in a world that taught you to feel nothing at all. But the issue runs deeper than family dynamics or childhood events. We live in a culture that pathologizes vulnerability and worships control. A culture that calls grief, depression, rage, disorder, and despair chemical imbalance, and then sells you solutions that promise relief without ever asking why you hurt in the first place. Arthur Schopenhauer once said that human life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. To escape pain, we chase desire. But desire fulfilled leads to emptiness, and so the cycle continues. Addiction fits this rhythm perfectly. It becomes the rhythm. We chase, we consume, we crash, and in the void that follows, the ache grows louder. But why is the ache so common now? Why does it seem like everyone's addicted to something? Because modern life is structured around disconnection. Disconnection from others through transactional relationships, digital interactions, and the constant pressure to perform. Disconnection from nature, living in boxes, staring at screens, losing the rhythms that once grounded us. Disconnection from our bodies, ignoring hunger, fatigue, intuition, emotion, and most fatally, disconnection from the self. The French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre warned of bad faith, the act of lying to ourselves to avoid responsibility for who we are. In addiction, this becomes embodied. You lie to yourself daily. You say, I need this, it's under control, it's not that bad, but the truth lurks beneath. You're not living, you're coping, you're surviving in a world that rewards surface over depth, speed over presence, numbness over truth. You never meant to build a life around avoidance, but now you look around and it's all you see. Not just in yourself, but everywhere. Addiction doesn't always wear a needle or a bottle. Sometimes it wears a tailored suit, drives a Tesla, runs a Fortune 500 company, and has perfect teeth. It gets applause for its hustle, for its 16-hour days. It's admired, even envied, but beneath the surface, the wiring is the same, a relentless, gnawing need to stay distracted from the self. This is the silent epidemic, not the addiction to substances, but the addiction to disconnection. You see it in how people can't sit still for 5 minutes without checking their phone. You see it in the compulsive need to document every moment instead of living it. You see it in the eyes of children begging for attention from parents who are emotionally absent, scrolling, emailing elsewhere. You see it in the obsession with productivity, where even rest must be optimized. We have confused stimulation with aliveness, and in doing so, we have become hollow. Let's be clear. Addiction doesn't just destroy the addict. It distorts reality for everyone around them. It warps relationships, warps trust, warps love. When the pursuit of relief becomes more important than presence, intimacy dies. Not just sexual intimacy, but emotional intimacy, spiritual intimacy, the raw human kind that nourishes the soul. You may think you're escaping pain, but you're transmitting it. Every unresolved trauma becomes someone else's burden. Your children absorb the shame you never confronted. Your partner walks on eggshells around the moods you suppressed. Your friends slowly drift away, unsure why you always seem slightly elsewhere. This is how addiction becomes generational. Not just through genetics, but through behavior, silence, and inheritance of pain. A parent addicted to work becomes a child addicted to approval. A mother addicted to control creates a daughter addicted to perfectionism. The drug changes, but the ache remains. There's a cost to living disconnected, and it's not just emotional, it's physical. Modern science shows what ancient wisdom always suspected. The mind and body are not separate. They are one system. And when trauma is ignored, the body keeps the score. Dr. Maté often speaks of patients who, after a lifetime of repressed emotion, develop autoimmune diseases, chronic fatigue, cancer. Not from weakness, but from a lifetime of being unable to express themselves. The immune system turns on the body in the same way a person turns on themselves when they're told their truth is too much. Addiction, then, isn't just a coping mechanism, it's a warning light, a distress signal, a cry for help from a system overwhelmed by the unbearable weight of unprocessed emotion. And yet we still treat it as a crime. We shame, isolate, incarcerate. We throw addicts into prisons instead of asking what drove them there. We medicate away the symptoms without touching the root. This is not just ignorance, it's cruelty disguised as order. Worse still, our culture profits from our addiction. Tech companies hire behavioral psychologists to design apps that hijack your dopamine system. The food industry engineers hyper-palatable products to override satiety. The fashion and beauty industries create insecurity to sell solutions. And all of it is normalized. We live in a world that creates pain, then sells the anesthesia. And when people get hooked on the anesthetic, we call them the problem. This is why Gabor Maté refuses to separate addiction from society. You cannot treat the addict without treating the system that made addiction a logical response. You cannot ask people to get clean without giving them something worth being clean for. Think about that. How many times have you told yourself, if I just stop this habit, I'll be okay, without ever asking what made the habit necessary in the first place? How often do we try to subtract the addiction instead of adding what's missing? Because here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. People don't heal because they stop using. They heal when they feel safe enough to stop needing. And that safety rarely exists. Not in families that punish emotion, not in workplaces that reward burnout, not in societies that glorify stoicism over honesty. So we stay addicted, not because we're broken, but because we're alone. Addiction flourishes in the absence of connection. And in this modern world, connection is scarce. When you scroll endlessly instead of sleeping, when you reach for substances instead of silence, when you grind yourself into exhaustion just to feel worthy, you are not indulging in weakness. You are answering a wound that has never been seen. But if you don't name the wound, it will own you, and it will replicate itself in every part of your life, your career, your relationships, your inner monologue. So the question is no longer, what are you addicted to? It's, what pain have you been trained to ignore? And what will happen when you finally stop running from it? Because here's the devastating truth. If you don't face your pain, you will pass it on. But there is another path, a rebellion that begins not with willpower, but with awareness. A way out that does not shame the addict, but dignifies the wound. And that's where we go next. You've been told the only way out is discipline, that you just need to try harder, push through, get your act together. But what if that's part of the trap? Because you've tried that, haven't you? You've deleted the app, you've thrown away the bottle, you've promised yourself never again. And then the ache returns, quiet at first, then louder, until it drowns out everything else, until you reach again for the thing you swore off, and the shame is worse than before. This is the cycle of addiction. Not weakness, not failure, disconnection. And the real rebellion, the only one that matters, is not against the substance, the behavior, or even the habit. It's against the silence, the numbness, the self-abandonment that made addiction necessary. Breaking free doesn't begin with strength, it begins with honesty. Can you tell the truth about your pain without dressing it up? Can you admit the depth of your loneliness without trying to escape it? Can you stop asking, how do I fix myself? And start asking, what parts of me have never been heard? This shift, subtle but seismic, is what Gabor Maté calls the compassionate inquiry. Not interrogation, not judgment, but curiosity with tenderness. What were you missing that this addiction tried to provide? Love, safety, belonging, control? Until you know the answer, you're not chasing a drug. You're chasing a feeling you were never allowed to have. That's where the healing begins, by naming the need. Because a need you can name is a need you can finally meet. But to do that, you must confront the narratives you were given. The belief that your worth depends on what you achieve, that emotion is weakness, that independence is strength, that needing others is shameful. All of these are lies. They are the architecture of a society that benefits from your disconnection, and they crumble the moment you step back into yourself. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. But chaos is not your enemy, it is your signal. Your soul trying to claw its way back through the noise. So how do you start the rebellion? You begin by slowing down. Addiction feeds on speed, on never having to pause long enough to feel. But healing thrives in stillness, in presence, in sitting with the discomfort long enough to hear what it's trying to teach you. You begin by seeking connection, not correction. This means finding spaces, however rare, where your story is not pathologized but witnessed. Therapists, friends, recovery groups, even one safe person who says, I see you, I get it, you're not crazy. Because you're not. You're not broken. You're a person who adapted brilliantly to pain, and now those adaptations are hurting you. Breaking free means honoring those adaptations, then letting them go. Not with punishment, but with gratitude. Thank you, distraction, for getting me through that time. Thank you, addiction, for helping me survive. But I don't need you anymore. This is radical. This is rebellion. Not against the substance, but against the shame. Because shame is the glue that holds addiction in place. It tells you that you are the problem, that you don't deserve healing, that you are fundamentally flawed. But shame only survives in isolation. The moment you speak your truth, raw, unfiltered, trembling, it begins to dissolve. This is why true healing is never solitary. You cannot recover in the same environment that made you sick. You need connection. Real, vulnerable, unperformative connection. Not likes, not followers, not check-ins. Someone who will sit in the dark with you and not flinch. And as that connection deepens, something miraculous happens. The craving loses its grip, not because you fought harder, but because you no longer need the escape. The pain has somewhere to go now. It's not just yours to carry alone. In this light, recovery is not about abstinence, it's about wholeness, about becoming the person you were before the world told you who to be, before the mask, before the silence, before the addiction. This is not easy. It means grief, grieving the years you spent disconnected, grieving the childhood you never had, grieving the time wasted, the relationships lost, the damage done. But grief is sacred. It means you're alive again. And in that grief is the doorway to freedom. Not the frantic kind that screams, I'm fixed, but the quiet kind that whispers, I'm real. So the next time the craving comes, whether it's for sugar or scrolling or sex or status, pause. Not to fight it, but to listen. Ask yourself gently, what is this really about? What part of me is hurting right now? And what would happen if I stopped trying to fix it and simply gave it love instead? Because the rebellion is not loud. It doesn't look like triumph. It looks like a man choosing to cry instead of drink, a woman choosing to rest instead of hustle, a child choosing to speak instead of shut down. It looks like you choosing truth over performance. That's how the spell is broken. That's how the healing begins. It starts quietly. You wake up one morning and realize the ache is still there, but something's different. You're not running from it. You're not numbing it. You're letting it be. It hurts, of course it does, but it also feels real. For the first time in a long time, you're not living behind glass. You're not surviving your life. You're in it. This is the moment most people miss. The moment after the detox, after the last drink, after the final scroll, hit, swipe, binge. They think that's the victory, the end point. But that's just the threshold. The true journey begins when you face the question you've spent your whole life avoiding. Who am I without the addiction? Strip away the crutches, remove the distraction. What's left? Silence, space, uncertainty. And beneath it all, a trembling truth you barely recognize. You've never really met yourself. That's the final revelation. Not that addiction is the enemy, but that disconnection from the self is the true crisis. And healing is not about fighting the addiction. It's about remembering who you were before the world made you forget. Gabor Maté calls it a return, a homecoming, not to some idealized version of who you should be, but to the child who felt everything deeply, the one who wasn't afraid to cry, the one who asked questions no one could answer, the one who just wanted to be held. That child never left. They were buried under years of coping, performance, silence, shame. And now, as you clear the rubble, you see them again. Eyes wide, heart raw, still waiting for you. You don't need to become someone new. You need to unbecome the layers you put on to survive. The masks, the armor, the endless noise. You thought healing meant becoming stronger, but it actually means becoming softer. And that softness, that tenderness, that presence, it's what the addiction was always trying to replicate. A sense of peace, of safety, of home. You were never craving the drug, you were craving yourself. Nietzsche wrote, "No one can build you the bridge on which you and only you must cross the river of life." But he also said something else, something easily overlooked. In the mountains of truth, you never climb in vain. Every slip, every relapse, every desperate cry for relief, it wasn't a failure. It was part of the mountain. It was your soul refusing to give up, even when the pain was unbearable. And now, standing on the edge of something deeper than recovery, transformation, you see it clearly. Addiction didn't destroy you. It revealed what needed healing. It showed you the places still in shadow. It led you through fire back to your own humanity. This is why Maté insists we must stop asking, how do I stop this behavior? And start asking, what kind of life makes the addiction unnecessary? Because that's the truth that changes everything. Healing doesn't come from control. It comes from connection to the body, to others, to the truth, to the parts of you you were told were too much. Your rage, your sadness, your longing, your sensitivity. All of them belong. All of them are the doorway back to you. There is no final destination, no neat ending. There will be hard days, there will be old cravings, the wound might whisper again. But now you know the voice, you know its name. It's not the voice of failure, it's the voice of the part of you still healing. You can sit with it, you can breathe with it, you can say, I hear you. And in that moment, you reclaim what addiction stole, your present. This is not what the world calls success. There's no badge for facing your shadow, no trophy for choosing truth over numbness, but there is something better, freedom. The freedom to feel without fear, to live without running, to meet yourself fully with nothing left to hide. So the next time you feel the urge, the pull toward the old escape, don't ask how to stop. Ask what's asking to be felt. Ask what you truly need. Ask how you can offer yourself presence instead of punishment. Because the real work isn't becoming someone better. It's remembering who you were before the pain. That's the root. That's the cure. That's the truth no one tells you. You were never broken. You were abandoned by systems, by people, and eventually by yourself. But now you're back, and that changes everything.